Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, as we continue our conversation on the future of our great country, I have with me an eminent young Nigerian leader, a community organizer, and who is also a lawyer. He was actually the convener of the Not Too Young to Run movement that made some very significant changes. Also in 2018, he was the winner of the Rising Democracy Leader in Africa that was given them, I believe, by the National Democratic Institute. I'd like to welcome to Inside Sources, Mr. Samson Itodo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming to Inside Sources.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's a conversation on the future of our country.
Mm-hmm.
And, we like to start by saying that if you look at where we are today as a country, do you think that we have a trajectory that will take us to that greater Nigeria that all of us believe, or most of us believe, is the destiny of Nigeria?
So as a nationalist, I am very optimistic about the future of the country. Because as one who subscribed to, certain democratic principles, I clearly believe that the future of our country, it's bright. But to take us to that promised land, there are several decisions that need to be made. And I don't think that we're on the path of making those decisions. The first one is you can't have a country that does not know how to count and how to manage figures. And what do I mean? Yes, we are grappling with data management as a country. This is a country where, yes, give it to the National Identity Management Commission, the NIMC, who has registered, over 110 million Nigerians. But our population is estimated at somewhere around 220 million. It is still population estimates.
Yeah.
Now, if you're thinking about the future of a country, we need to know how many we are. We need to have a consolidated data management system, because that's the only way you can plan. So that's one. The second point, it's about how we are spending our money. But let's even go back, because before you spend, you need to mobilize the resources. And so when you think about all the aspects of our national life, you cannot secure the future of a country when you adopt a monolithic approach towards your revenue generation. Yes, successive administrations have mounted the fact that they're diversifying our economy, but we still rely, to a large extent, on what? On oil. And so whether it's the subnational entities or at the national level, what steps are we making to manage, harness our resources, and plunge those resources back into developing, the state? So you look at the solid mineral sector, we're talking lithium. If you look at even gold, the bigger challenge for Nigerians is when you look at these resources and the way the government is managing these resources, it doesn't really tell well that they are maximizing the revenue generated from this national resources and they're using it to fund our development. The third part is when you think about the future of your country, you need to look at the leadership. And more importantly, the leadership recruitment process. And for a country like Nigeria, that is a constitutional democracy, elections are a critical feature. So when you have elections that are not transparent, they produce unaccountable, unresponsive political leaders. And that is the bane of our own development, because you have a weak electoral system that does not produce transparent, competent, leaders who have what it takes to provide the kind of leadership that Nigeria actually requires. Now, I'm not saying that credible elections are guaranteed for, accountable leadership. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it's a start-off point. But we have made some progress, but there's so much that we need to do about fixing, our electoral system. So when I look at the future of a country, I am quite optimistic, but I don't think the political leadership I see across board is one that inspires any form of confidence that you have a political leadership across board that cares about generational equity. Because if they do, then they won't think about the next elections. They will rather think about what the future portends, for the vast majority of our population.
Okay, excellent point, Bro Samson, and I like the way you put out the opening points, and and I tried to make some points. So, I mean, you were the leader of the Not Too Young to Run movement that eventually led to that bill. So let's take it from there in terms of the young people in our country. What is your experience? It will seem, and this is my view, and then you can comment. It will seem that a lot of our young people, which by the way is the more significant portion of our population, if you look at the demography, a lot of our young people seems to me to have been more captivated about the good things of life, a lot of interest in entertainment, which is not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is that we are not having a very engaging interaction. I mean, the younger people of our country are not effectively engaged in the political process.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you because first, when we say we're not seeing young people,
Yeah,
you go back to 2020 when you had the NSAS protest.
yeah,
It was a concerted effort by young people to push against state repression
right,
on rights that manifested as police brutality.
right.
That advocacy was led by young people.
True.
The Not Too Young to Run that you've referenced
Right.
was also led by young people.
Yeah.
And it was about transforming our constitution, not because we wanted to fulfill a democratic ideal by recognizing that young people need to be at the decision-making table. But no, young people wanted to change the face of politics and then contribute, their energy, their resilience, their innovation into public governance. So when you say young people are not engaged, you go on social media. In fact, the state, the federal government have been forced to reverse certain policies, including the National Assembly, have been forced to withdraw legislations. And I give you a classic example. The first one was the recent mandatory voting bill. The second one was the draconian counter-subversion bill. Those bills were withdrawn as a result of public outcry, largely led by young people.
Okay, Samson,
so we see that level of engagement.
Yeah,
but I understand the point you're making about,
I'm talking about, because those things that you said, I agree entirely. I'm talking about the political process, the partisan political process to have young people get involved. So like you said,
yes.
it ends us. Look at the kind of energy that we saw in NSAS. Compelling. What I have not seen and what I think might be helpful is to have young people invade the partisan political process. Something that's what I have in mind. That's what I'm talking about.
No, but there are different entry points. The first entry point, and let's look at the different forms of participation. Let's look at the common one, which is voting. The big question is, have we seen, a lot of young people show up to cast their vote at elections? And I'd say this, quite frankly, that amongst the demography that comes out to vote at elections, a larger percentage of them are young people. But that is even a small fraction of young people. Because when you look at the voter register, the last election in 2023, only 43% of young people actually showed up to cast their vote. And so the big question is, are young people making their numbers count, in the course of elections? I say no, they're not doing that, even though they are still the largest bulk. But I think young people can do much more by showing up to cast their vote, for a leader of their choice during an election. It doesn't make sense because for us to continue to mount that young people
dramatic changes.
Absolutely. That's what happened in Zambia in 2021. That's what happened in Liberia. That is what happened in the recent Ghana elections in December. The ability to mobilize the youth base to show up at elections. So young people need to show up on the day of elections to vote if they want any change. But then the bigger question, when you look at the second level, which is the political parties, a lot of young people have expressed their interest, to get into the political parties. But what have the parties done? The first thing they've done is there's an absolute lack of internal democracy in the parties. There's a nexus between internal democracy in a party and the level of youth or women representation. Because if young people express their interest to participate, to
Right.
run,
Mm-hmm.
if the parties don't conduct democratic primaries,
Mm.
they substitute the candidates that emerge from those elections, I bet you're not going to see a lot of young people. And we haven't worked on this for several years. We've seen stories and experiences of young people who have emerged from primaries and they're substituted, by the parties.
Yeah.
When you also look at the cost of politics and how much it costs, to run for office, that is also another way of ensuring that the level playing field is not equitable for all. So there's actually unfair, competition. But what do we need to do to get more young people?
Please.
The other thing, you've got to make political engagement enticing and meaningful for young people. If young people don't connect the level of their participation in elections and the political process with the quality of their livelihood, they're not going to get interested in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Because talking to young people, they tell you that political parties are nothing but just an assemblage of old expired politicians who have nothing to deliver. So these are the fundamental issues.
Yeah, let me interject just so we can deepen the issues. So my view is that if we can manage to get young people to understand, and we can always debate how to do it, but to get them to understand that, look, these people that have orchestrated the political process in a way that is not equitable, they are deliberate. Okay, so they will not on their own. So we have to, so you talked about enticing. So maybe we have to do a lot of that, but with a clear understanding or a clear narrative to them, a clear communication that, look, this thing is something you have to understand, that your determination, your resilience is required. Because those folks, the current political elite, they are not interested. They're not interested in you taking it. They want to keep it for themselves. If possible, turn it into something that is quasi-monarchical, and isolate the larger number of our people. My view is that if we can find a way to, and that's why I use the word invasion, have young people invade the political process. So that is when we can actually make the change happen, because clearly they know what they want. We saw it in the NSAS. They know what they want, and there's no doubt about it. All of us were held bound. It was, they were calling the shots. So that tells you clearly that they're not satisfied with what is going on. But when it comes to election day, they don't come out. They don't register to vote. When they register to vote, they don't come out enough. And we don't have enough of them in the wards, in the local government. So I'm thinking that we probably have to do more than just tell them that, look, we are trying to entice you. We need to communicate with them that this thing is about, it's almost not to use Obasanjo's word, that it's almost like this is your life that is going down. And you have to take a desperate interest to transform the situation.
No, you see, I totally agree with you. And there are three dimensions to this. The first one is that the quest to get young people into office needs to be driven by a clear agenda and an understanding of the kinds of leadership that Nigeria needs at this moment. And I've said this repeatedly, that if the decision to run for office as a young person is just to represent youth interest, then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, true.
That the quest to get young people into office must seek to do three things. One, if it doesn't put food on the table, it doesn't address the question of security, and then also fosters justice, then there's no point actually having a young person in office, because it is more than just being a young person.
Right.
And I've always said, do not negotiate, for political space from a standpoint of age, but negotiate from a standpoint of value that you bring to the table. The second point relates to, you've got to negotiate. And I say this, that when people think about, power. You're dealing with power. And there are people who live and die just to ensure that they have control of political power. They're not going to cede that power.
Yeah.
And so what you need to do is, one, I agree to the extent that, yes, you need to do what? Invade the political parties. But invading the political parties is not enough if you're unable to build cohesion.
Absolutely.
Because you need to build cohesion within the parties to be able to make a demand. And the only thing politicians respond to is pressure.
Yeah.
And if you demonstrate that you have electoral value, then you can actually try to alter the balance of power. And you need that level of coordination. The third point is, why is this clamor for the big parties when you have other parties and other political platforms that you can actually aspire, and seek to run on those platforms? In this country, in Benue State, and I would never forget, a young man who was about 26 or 27, one of the beneficiaries of a Not Too Young to Run, ran as a candidate under a party that was unknown. He ran and he beat the two major political formations in that state.
Wow.
Why? Because he had grassroots appeal. And this is why young people need to understand that all politics is local.
We hope that these points are going out and making the transformation. So let's move it along to the kind of political reforms, in your view, that has to take place, even to further enlarge the space. And I'm going to start from one that I think is critical, and there are several. I think that the presidential system by itself has not yielded us any significant benefit, especially since 1999. And the reason I say that is, I got the opportunity to watch from very close quarters for 8 years. And I noticed that the president has the capacity or the ability, or the structure allows him to sit in one place. It's not compelled to be accountable. It's not compelled to engage with the people. Look, in the case of the president under which institution we serve, I think maybe he did media interviews, maybe altogether in 8 years, maybe 3 or 4 times. So the president can actually be cocooned in the villa, and then he sends the media. You go to the media, go and interact with the grassroots. You do this, and he is just sitting pretty like a monarch. Unlike in the parliamentary system, where the head of government, the prime minister, just the title, is compelled, every time parliament sits, to be confronted by the leader of opposition, who is going to take, jibes at him at the earliest opportunity. And then there's also what they call, if you use the British system, the question time, when, you have to defend your policies, where you have to respond to issues that are happening, that are affecting people's lives. A president can decide to just disappear and get the Minister of Information or the Special Advisor on Media to be talking about those things. But in a parliamentary system, you will have to speak. So one of the reforms that I think we need to do is to have go back to a parliamentary system. Now, that is what I think. I would like to have your take. But besides that, what are the other kinds of political reforms that you will advocate for?
So first, let's deal with this sort of system of government.
Right.
Now, you're quite aware that by the 1979 Constitution, presidentialism was introduced to the country.
Yeah.
And we copied the American system.
Yeah.
When you look at the American system, what is fundamentally different from Nigeria's system? I think that I agree to an extent that it's about the system. But systems are managed by people.
Yeah.
And that's why there are certain checks that are imbued in systems to foster accountability.
Right.
There's a State of the Union address which the president gives annually. In Nigeria, there were attempts, and up till this moment in the National Assembly, to do what? To pass a legislation. But why is it that for 26 years of democratic experience, that legislation has not been passed?
They don't want to do it.
Exactly the point. So you can have a parliamentary system of government if whether you call him prime minister or head of government chooses not to, and he has the legislators in his pocket. Don't forget that even in a parliamentary system, he appoints, those ministers or whatever you call them, cabinet, whatever. He appoints them, even though they are elected.
Yeah.
But what if they all come from his party? So it's not this.
The opposition leader will be sitting in front of him every day.
But you have the opposition.
Okay, well, that's another
It is
point.
this same country where the ruling party elects and appoints the officers of the opposition party. It's right here. It happened before us. So we are dealing with what we call democratic capture. That is a co-optation and a capture of all the instruments of accountability that exist within a democratic setting. And that's why all this bad behavior is being tolerated. So yes, we can switch to a parliamentary system if you don't address the question of a culture. That's why you have checks and balances. In a democratic system, it's there in a presidential system of government. Why is it that the National Assembly cannot summon the president to address the National Assembly? Why? Because you already have a situation where the president is considered the leader of the party.
Yeah.
Right? He determines who gets the ticket at the end of the day. So challenge him, and then you will actually go to rot.
Right.
Now, so those are the issues. We need to come to a point where our institutions, are able, these things we call the agencies of protection in a democratic system function devoid of the individuals who have, power. That's where we need to get to.
I agree. And the interesting thing is that we have been there before. Sitting at that chair, where you have now Mr. Itodo, who was in his 20s in 1979 or 1980, was a minister under Shagari.
Yeah.
And he said it here to the hearing of the whole public, that in the Second Republic, the party, was supreme.
Yeah.
So the president was not the leader of the party. He said that there were occasions, I think, at least once or so, where he was a minister, Shagari was presiding over Federal Executive Council meeting, and the chairman of the MPN then, Chief Adisa Kinoye, called the president. He said that he was there and the president stopped the meeting to go and pick the call of the party chairman, because then the party was supreme. So my point, Samson, is that we have been there.
Yeah.
What has happened to us is that we rapidly, I guess it's also part because of the military experience. We lost those democratic values because of military rule, in my view. But since 1999, when we've had we returned to civilian, there has been no appetite by the politicians to try and do things properly. What will it take us to compare those changes, in your own view?
Well, first, I think it's going to take active citizenship. Because where we were in 1999 and 2000 is not where we are in 2025.
It's worse.
Things have gone worse, but you've also seen the level of political socialization increase. And I think it would have gone terribly. The reason why the politicians are devising new ways, right? It's because citizens are becoming more conscious, and information dissemination, it's now accelerated compared to what you used to have. So you're beginning to see how citizens are using these tools, but you're also seeing some transformative, leaders in a public space who are still able to muster the courage, to speak and hold government to account. We need to have more of that. So including all these new political formations, they need to do what? To go back to what was the dream of our forefathers when they talked about political parties, is that parties are supreme and not individuals. And that's something we need to deal with, right? So secondly, and how you fix this, you active citizenship, yes, you need those party reforms, but we need to have laws that are enforced.
I was going to say,
I'm not saying we need laws because we have a retinue of laws. No, you need to have laws that are enforced. And this is where the rule of law actually comes in. And this is where the judiciary actually comes in. And that's why these whole cases of judicial misconduct, whether it's corruption in the judiciary, should be troubling to every Nigerian. Because where then will you turn to for justice? Because the whole concept of judicial review in a democracy is that when the executive performs in a manner that is outside their jurisdiction, that you have the National Assembly hold them to account. Where the National Assembly fails and the executive also fails, that you can institute a matter in court and the court will deliver decisions that reviews the actions of these two different units. But if that same institution that should dispense justice is unable to do that, then we are toast.
We are toast. Well, let's hope that we will find a way around it. I wanted to ask you, since it's just been 2 years now that President Itodo has been in office, what's your own assessment of his performance in the first 2 years?
I think first is a mixed bag. And I'd say that when you look at the decisions that he's taken, yes, he's made bold decisions. And you give him that. He's made bold decisions around the economy, around different aspects of our national life. I think he could do more. But then the president needs to know that it is beyond the rhetoric of recognizing that those decisions have brought untold hardship to Nigerians. Nigerians want succor. They want to see, they want to feel the results of some of these decisions. If you want to assess him over the last 2 years, the security situation has not really improved based on the experiences that citizens actually face. Yeah. When you also look at this point about what are the democratic credentials, and I say it is really troubling that we're gradually gravitating towards what is a semblance of a one-party state. And I hope that, the opposition get their hearts together, because when you take competition, out of democratic politics, it loses its vitality.
Completely.
And so when you also look at even appointments that the president has made, whether it's to INEC or to other democratic institutions, there's so much that is left to be desired. And I hope that, over the next 2 years, that he rises above partisanship and acts as a statesman to take decisions that fosters reforms to the electoral process, that enhances not just our democratic credentials, but really improves and guarantees democratic legitimacy.
Do you think that we should have a situation where the president continues to nominate members of INEC?
Absolutely not. Just the late Justice Ways, God bless his memory, had made that recommendation that the president should not appoint commissioners. INEC have also, as part of their proposals on electoral reforms, that the president should not appoint resident electoral commissioners. The president does not appoint commissioners of police. He appoints only the IG, right? So why shouldn't INEC also adopt that same strategy? But for the interest of our democracy, public confidence, and the independence of the Electoral Commission, the president should not be involved in the appointment of national commissioners in INEC.
Final question, because of our time. So it seems that the opposition is coming together for 2027. You have ADC said that David Mark is the chair, Ogbeni Aregbesola is the secretary, Atiku is there, and, some other notables. Seems they are coming together. Do you think that there can be, based on everything that we know, there can be an effective opposition? Because in my view, we've not had anything close to an effective opposition in the last 2 years.
Well, you see, when you look at other countries like South Africa, you look at countries like Ghana, you just enjoy, that's what democracy is about. It's about competition of ideas. This whole onslaught on the opposition to try to decimate the opposition is a form of authoritarianism and democracy capture. But then, those who are also in the opposition, they also have a responsibility.
They do.
Why are they not putting their house in order? Why
are they allowing themselves to be decimated?
Exactly, right? What it simply tells you is that they are all the same characters. that they do not have the democratic, the sort of disposition to uphold democratic ethos and principles. And so for me, it's good they are coming together, but they have to present to Nigerians a different deal. You need an opposition. Opposition is part of democracy, but I'm not the one who would establish opposition. Those who say that they are constituting themselves into opposition, they need to be opposition, not just in words, but in action, but also demonstrating in the constitution and the regulatory instruments of their parties that they are Democrats and not individuals that are only interested in capturing political power.
Thank you so much, Mr. Samson Itodo.
It's always a delight
for coming to Inside Sources. And thank you for the work that you are doing in Yaga and all of.
No, you too, because Inside Sources, it's really has emerged as a platform for having, very incisive conversations and providing clarity to Nigerians. So thank you for doing that work as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for believing in Nigeria so much as to take a risk to be out there and push these things, because it does take a lot of courage. And, I appreciate that. I believe that we get that Nigeria, if we don't relent.
We will.
And I see that people like you don't relent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Right. And there you have it. There's a segment. We're going to be returning with another segment for Inside Sources. Inside Sources will be right back.